And welcome into the program. This is your game plan for retirement with Northwestern Ohio's resource for a common sense approach to planning for your financial, investment, and retirement future. He is president and founder of McIntire Retirement Services. Chris McIntire here with us. Always a pleasure having you on the program, Chris. How's everything going with you?
Hey, we're doing real well this summer. Finally getting a little break from the heat here and enjoying that very much. And, because there's a lot of stress that's involved with the weather. You're paying attention to heavy storms. We've had a lot of flooding here. One of the islands out there on Lake Erie got 17 inches of rain in one day, and it stress tested all of their water treatment systems and whatnot. And, probably caused a lot of people to go get a stress test and see how their heart's doing. So our thought for the day here is, hey, make sure you stress test your portfolio like you do other parts of your body and other pieces and, airplanes and so on, all get stress tests. So that's what we're going to chat about today.
Yeah, I was thinking of engineering. You mentioned the body. Yeah, we get physicals. We might even go and get that stress test running on the treadmill for a while for our personal health. But with bridges and homes or skyscrapers, all the way across the board with any kind of engineering or building, like the codes have changed and updated because things have been stress tested, and they realize, hey, we've got to do it a certain way for this to last and maintain confidently. And of course, Chris, I think that's what we want with our financial and retirement plans, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we deal a lot with insurance companies, and they always plan for the worst case scenario, right? That's what insurance does. It covers us just in case. And, we want to build portfolios and retirement plans that can also handle the stress of a stock market correction, rising interest rates like in 2022, the housing crisis of 2008. I mean, we've had a number of these in our, kind of our mature years of life and, making it, it doesn't seem like we have normal recessions anymore. We have crises instead. So, it's stress tests. We have to stress test ourselves, don't we, sometimes?
Absolutely, Chris. I was actually just looking at the market, the past history over the last month, over the last 6 months, and saw where, this whole conflict with Iran began and how deep a little decline that was. And then I zoomed out even further to like 5 and 10 years. And I went back and looked at COVID. At this point in time, that 30% downturn that we had when COVID hit almost looks like just a minimal blip on the radar with the continued progress this market has made. But again, we want to stress test this because if and when there is a decline in the market, what impact is that going to have on retirees' plans, their well-being, their sense of confidence, their ability to produce income? These are the kind of questions that you run people's plans and scenarios and projections through to make sure that they have a reasonable sense of that confidence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, and that's why we put things in kind of our bucket approach, if you will. We have a higher risk bucket, a lower risk bucket, maybe even a safe bucket, where, if something happens to the high risk side, that's why we go over to the safe side for, to draw our income off of. So, having some alternative plans is a way to de-stress a portfolio. And, we always talk about safe money strategies probably every week on the show for the last 10 years or however long we've been recording with you, Peter. And, as we look forward here, inflation may be the next stress test for the stock market. Because if we go back to, kind of that late 70s, where inflation was very high, interest rates were very high, the stock market did basically nothing for 10, 15-year time frame back in there. Taxes were very high. So we've been very fortunate to ride this long-term wave. But now this inflation thing, once that cat got left out of the bag during all that extra COVID spending, it's been hard to put it back in. And, we're always going to have these geopolitical pieces that are going on right now with the high prices of oil, trying to, keep those inflation numbers up a little bit higher than what the Federal Reserve would like to have them. So will they raise interest rates? That's not good for stocks and bonds either.
Yeah, well, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about different factors, a variety of different factors, and questions to ask to stress test your portfolio and most importantly, your plan for lasting financial progress and confidence and stability, stress testing the plan. And of course, if you'd like to get a plan put together, if you'd like to review and evaluate your current plan, if you'd like to run some of these stress tests, Chris McIntire offers that as a extension of the education here on the program. The discussion will lead into your ability to have these questions asked and examined in your situation through a complimentary review. No cost, no obligation. All you need to do to get your game plan for retirement put together or reviewed and evaluated is start with a call to 419-332-0532. And Chris and the friendly staff there at McIntire Retirement Services will begin the conversation, find a convenient time, and make sure that you do have a reason to have a good sense of confidence about your plan. So if you'd like to get that started, again, pick up the phone, give a call. McIntire Retirement Services, 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. Chris, I actually think we've already seen some stress testing with inflation. The period from 2021 to 2022 through 2023, we saw that inflation. And a lot of people, especially retirees, I think are more impacted specifically by inflation than those of us who are still working and earning a paycheck. But everybody felt that one.
Yeah, without a doubt. That like two by fours were going for $8 a piece or something ridiculous, and really crushed the housing market, which leads into a lot of other places. Let's take the housing market for example. If your mortgage right now is 3%, why would you want to sell and move up and get a bigger house? That's even more at a 7% interest rate. People just aren't doing that. So we have kind of a frozen housing market, especially at that entry level,
Yeah.
that first time home buyer, and maybe even, later on the baby boomers who are wanting to downsize. Now they're not, they're a little more cash heavy, but, things related to the housing market are washers and dryers, the durable goods, some of those things that people do when they buy a house. They may be remodeling and, new carpet. Lots of service jobs come along with that as well, and in the construction industry. So a couple of things here that I have on my notes, Peter, is engineers stress test important structures. Okay, remember down in Florida they had that condominium that collapsed,
Oh,
right,
yeah.
from all that salt water. Okay? New York City, they just had a building they were concerned about collapsing, and thankfully, stress testing helped, I think, prevent a disaster there. Okay? Your retirement should be stress tested too. Confidence comes from preparation, not hope. And planning isn't predicting, it is preparing. So, my wife and I take our boat out, go over to the islands and get dinner or something. Always give it a quick once over, start the engines. Is everything working well? Anything look out of whack here? You're looking at the weather, you're preparing just in case something happens. And the Coast Guard's motto is Semper Paratus, always prepared.
Yeah, and you do that near shore so that if something is wrong, you are right there before you get out in deep water or too far away from any kind of land. And just in case, Chris, always have those life jackets with you as well, right?
Yep, without a doubt. And the irony is as we went out and went over to the island earlier this week for dinner, the remains of a boat that had crashed like at 3 o'clock in the morning were on a reef. And it was their first time they took a boat ride. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, what were they doing out there? But somebody unfortunately had passed away. So first boat ride, unprepared, boating in the middle of the night. I mean, you imagine if that person's your investment advisor, making those kinds of decisions. So, you certainly need to be, want someone who's going to help you have the ability to take a little bit more of a conservative approach, right? Look at that bucket philosophy there, to help stress and even stress test your portfolio where you're at right now. And, I had a client in just the other day and she says, I've been very aggressive over the course of time. Is it time that we take a step back? Said, I'm very content making someplace between 4 and 6, 4 and 7% at this point in my life. I don't need the stress of trying to make 15 or 20. I've got enough money. I want to make sure that we're maintaining that and not taking a 30% correction as we have to take money out of our portfolio. So, we often say, Peter, you and I being sports fans, you down there in the Carolina Hurricanes territory,
Stanley Cup champs.
Stanley Cup champs. Yeah, always a hockey reference with Peter and I. Is that, offense wins games, defense wins championships. And, saw that in the World Cup there, boy. Spain just manhandled Argentina in that, stranglehold them,
Yeah,
just the way
and
we
that
play.
was their game plan, I think, from the get-go, and they executed it very well. Had good coaching there. We're stress testing the defense. Chris, your unfortunate scenario out on the water just leads me to another analogy here is that you always want an experienced captain steering the ship for your retirement. I went out on a deep sea fishing trip one time, and to get out, we had to go through the Outer Banks of North Carolina where there's a lot of moving sandbars, shallow areas where a boat could easily beach itself or get stuck. And the captain was very experienced with it, said, no, I know these channels very well. Yes, they move, but I understand, where to go today and this week. By a month from now, it might be a little different, but I've been out here several times this week. And so, again, that's the kind of thing that if we are doing it by ourselves for the first time, we might not know where the hidden dangers lie. But if we've got an experienced captain who's navigated it before, we're more likely to get out there without issue, without problem. And I think that's where the average individual investor, hey, we've got access to the market these days. That much we have. But as far as how to utilize them and the blind spots that may be hidden beneath the surface, maybe we don't have the experience or the trained eye to spot and identify those, Chris. And that's why you offer that opportunity for the game plan for retirement and to do that complimentary review with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're probably speaking of Oregon Inlet, and there is no better place than to watch those big sport fishing boats come in and navigate that tricky Oregon Inlet down there in the Outer Banks. I love it, buddy.
Yeah.
Right. Stress testing is very important. We're looking at, if people go into retirement and, we're looking at a husband and wife combination, both of them are getting a Social Security benefit, let's say, and one of those spouses passes away. Okay, now we're down to, well, one Social Security benefit, maybe a pension reduction in there, and especially if it happens early in retirement. And we just had it happen to a wonderful client of ours. Spouse passed away, unexpectedly and early.
Mm.
But now you go into, you're filing single or widowed. Okay? And so we call that, almost call that the widow's penalty. You don't get near the deductions. You got to watch those Medicare premiums as well. The IRMA, we call that, those income thresholds. And a lot of times people say they'll go into retirement at 60, 62 years old, and say, hey, do you have any life insurance just in case? No, we don't really think we need any life insurance. We think we've got enough money. That's where it may make sense to get a term policy just to cover those first 10 years. Again, trying to de-risk your overall lifestyle, and that hopefully you don't need that term policy. I just had one expired after 20 years, paid 20 years of premiums into it, and thankfully I'm alive. I was okay paying those premiums. I pay premiums on my house so it doesn't burn down. Why would I not insure my life? I'm the breadwinner.
Well, Chris, I think that as we are talking about stress testing a retirement plan here, right, is that people are making these decisions in their late 50s, early 60s, thereabouts, right? That range. And we might not at that point even understand the implications of what happens when a spouse passes away. No one's promised how long we're going to be here. That could be any time from tomorrow to 30 or more years from now. But people are making decisions in this transition period of time and in early retirement, making decisions that would have lasting implications even beyond their own lifetime, with how they are positioning assets, how they're claiming and collecting Social Security, how they are claiming pensions if they have those, and maybe not with the full understanding of the effect that will have on a surviving spouse. Chris, you can run those numbers not only to illuminate what the impacts would be of this decision today into the future, but to show the numbers to say, well, if this were to happen 5 years or 10 years or 25 years from now, here's what that looks like from an income standpoint, from a tax standpoint, from that survivorship. I think you and I as guys, Chris, and not to stereotype, probably everybody makes a lot of financial decisions for the well-being of our family. And if we don't understand these implications, if we haven't stress tested it, then those decisions might be a little short-sighted.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ross and I build these portfolios, and we have some neat retirement software where we can, create an investment portfolio and say, okay, if you retire and we just get these average rates of returns where you get some, moderate fluctuation, here's what that looks like. But if you retire and we hit an immediate recession and we get 2 years of the market declining, this is that impact. Okay. And then we can say, okay, if that happens and we build in an alternative, this is what it looks like. So a great way to show that to clients. It's a visual impact. They can see it in real time, and you can, shift the portfolio for them. We can look at the Social Security strategies and shift that in real time. God forbid if somebody passed away unexpectedly, so you have a couple different options there as well.
Well, again, if you would like to see those scenarios, run those numbers, put together those projections and evaluate what the future forecasts look like for you, along with stress testing, examining all of the assumptions that your plan and your financial future are based on. That's what having a game plan for retirement and reviewing and analyzing your plan for retirement are all about. And Chris McIntire and the team at McIntire Retirement Services do offer that service on a complimentary courtesy basis for listeners and viewers to the program. So all you have to do to take them up on that valuable offer and opportunity is pick up the phone and give a call, 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. Chris, when you talk about the softwares and the analyzers that you have, you mentioned a stress test earlier of what if the market dropped 30%? And what if it dropped and maintained a downward trajectory for a period of time? You have some software that can help people understand what the potential impact on their portfolio would be, back testing, forward projecting what the scenarios in the individual positions that they already own and hold would be, correct?
That is correct, yes. And Ross is the master at helping me put some of these things together at the office there. We like to tease him a little bit. He's a kind of our research guru as well.
Yeah, yeah. Putting together all of the plans. I think, Chris, there are different parts of the plan that are needed, and the guy who understands the technology to run the scenarios is a great value add for the clients as well.
Yeah, and it gives us that team approach as well too. A lot of folks just watch the show here and think I'm the only one involved. Obviously, we've got great staff with at our office between Ross and Heidi and Robin, but we also have all the team support at Brookstone Capital Management. And then on the insurance annuity side, we have a lot of support, in the back office there, through a nice company based down in Atlanta there. And just has worked out very well. I'm an infrastructure geek. I like to have good infrastructure, solid things in place. And if you take care of the infrastructure, it certainly gives you some confidence going forward.
Well, again, if you would like to meet with the team, meet with Chris, have a plan designed, understand what the benefit of working with an experienced, qualified advisor would be to help you guide you through retirement, make sure that you are understanding some of the hidden risks and issues that could derail. Stress test that portfolio. Make sure that you will not fall subject to them. Pick up the phone, give a call, 419-332-0532. 419-332-0532. Chris, we mentioned the risk and stress testing and projecting out what happens if somebody passes away early. On the other side of that risk, stress testing the other scenario here. What happens if we live a long, long time? What happens if we hit 100 or live into our 90s and beyond? How does the portfolio hold up in that scenario? Because longevity is a risk multiplier, and a lot of people may not consider that as part of the plan or stress test for longevity.
You're right, and longevity is probably our number one risk that we want to see if we can manage, eliminate that type of thing, and try to prevent people from running out of income. Okay, they may run out of money, but running out of income is something different. So you have your Social Security, you have your pension. If you have an annuity payment, if the annuity has paid out all the cash you put into it, and you had a lifetime income, you're still getting that income. So that's why we say running out of income is different than running out of money here at the office. But and then as we get older, obviously people get, their health isn't as great as you and I talked before the show. How's my mom and dad doing? One in a nursing home and one living with my brother at age 93 who's had some heart issues here going and doing fine right now. But, I mean, the cost and whatnot that has, so a lot of people have not tried to mitigate the nursing home potential cost. And that's one of the big drivers, especially the longer that you live. Not everybody's going to fall asleep on the couch and not wake up like we would probably all want to have happen. Sometimes there's, prolonged stays at the nursing home, years, in fact, and, at $10,000 to $12,000 a month, depending where you're at. Man, you want to talk about bleeding a portfolio.
Well, Chris, we're living longer, but perhaps not always healthier. I mean, we've got a longer retirement, this generation, much more active, at least in the first several years of retirement, the first phase of retirement. We are doing more, we are staying healthier, we are moving more, we're taking on more, but there's still those phases where we slow down, and then when we're not going, and those phases are also costing us more. So the fact that we've got more activity in the early years, that costs more. The healthcare in the later years, again, living longer but maybe not healthier, and to support the health costs more. The question, really, you made a differentiating statement. And just to rephrase, the question is really not, will my money last for 20 years? The question really is, will my income support my lifestyle for as long as I might be alive, regardless of how long that is and the conditions that it might meet?
Yeah, absolutely correct, Peter. I like the way that you summed that up. And as we've been in this industry for a few decades, you run into so many more scenarios. You see where, the patterns that typically develop, and we hate to stereotype, but most people don't plan for going into a nursing home. The
Yeah.
people that do probably had a loved one that went into a nursing home and they were, writing checks of their inheritance, if you will, and maybe mom and dad had to sell everything and eventually sold the house and all of that because they were in a long-term care facility, especially for people that your kids live out of town or something like that. And I mean, I can tell you the burden that it is caring for two parents at the same time. And and my wife could probably tell you more because she has the more time on her hands, so she deals with it more. And then we add in the stresses of what the stock market can do to portfolios. So it's just having that plan in place that says, look, if everything goes according to plan, you're going to be fantastic. Let's take a look if it doesn't go according to plan, and what are our options to mitigate these risks. And, do we purchase some insurance? Do we buy a lifetime income annuity? Do we, create a less risky portfolio overall? Make sure you have money in some a safe bucket so that you can get through 6 to 12 months, if you will, and just employ many different strategies, because I guarantee you, when you watch the Super Bowl, hey, they've all got their game plan. If that's not working, right, they'll change. We'll use the hockey as an analogy. If the goalie's having a bad day, the coach can change that goalie. All the other players are still doing their thing, but one of the most important positions, people have an off night, so you have to be able to adjust to the conditions.
Or a boxing analogy from Mike Tyson's famous quote, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And this is what we're talking about here is stress testing that portfolio. If there was an uppercut or a hook from Tyson to your portfolio, to the plan, to the conditions in the world around us that we've based our plans and projections on, what happens to your scenario? And Chris, I know that you have been a self-proclaimed tax geek. One of those right hooks, it sometimes comes as a surprise to retirees, which are taxes. And in my mind, we need to stress test that as well, because the question really isn't if taxes are going to go up into the future, it's when will taxes go up into the future. And a lot of people have not stress tested for this, but there are strategies actually, not only to stress test, and again, you've got software and calculators to show people what that might look like, but also strategies to mitigate this as a risk and address it now.
Yes, yep, absolutely. And that's the nice thing about having some experience. You learn to not have bias. You want to look at everything and what is the good, the bad, and the ugly that deals with a certificate of deposit to SpaceX stocks to an annuity, to everything. And you have to have this open mind because, if you're going to act in the client's best interest, you really want to come into it with, an objective mind, not necessarily a subjective mindset that says, hey, we're going to take your square peg and force it through this round hole, because there isn't any other options available in the way we do our business. We're independent, so, we can pick and choose the way that we tailor plans to individual clients.
Well, Chris, if we have stress tested our portfolio, we have run the scenarios on paper and in the planning boardroom for when things go wrong, we can maybe go out into the real world and live with a little bit more confidence because we have planned and prepared for them. We understand how, if they happen, we would address them. And we get to live as a result with more confidence. So as you talk about, stress testing a portfolio, what are some of the things that you would look at and examine inside somebody's portfolio to say, yes, we've examined this, we've tested this. In your stress test, you've got a passing grade.
Yeah, perfect, Peter. And I'm going to read down my list here. So, a retirement plan that passes the stress test typically includes reliable income, appropriate investment risk, tax diversification, cash reserves, healthcare planning, your estate planning, and then regular reviews, and then tax diversification as well. I just did a Roth conversion on a stock that I had bought that was down in value pretty significantly. I just moved it into my Roth before we started the radio show today. So even I do some of these things, obviously.
Well, the strongest structures, skyscrapers, bridges, they aren't built for the sunny days. They are built to withstand storms and earthquakes and still stand. Your retirement plan should be no different, ladies and gentlemen. That's why you need to stress test it. And if you would like to get a plan put together, review and evaluate, run the stress test on all of the technology and the tools that Chris McIntire and the team at McIntire Retirement Services have available to them. If you'd like to have an experienced, qualified guide through retirement, a head coach and a coordinator of your plan along with you, pick up the phone and give McIntire Retirement Services a call, 419-332-0532, 419-332-0532, or online, McIntyreRetirementServices.com, McIntyreRetirementServices.com, the website, of course, available there for connection and contact, but 419-332-0532, a great number to call to start that conversation. Ask a few questions, whatever's on your mind, get some ideas, some strategies put together through a strategy session, and then have a more lasting sense of confidence justifiably because you've stress tested your portfolio. Again, give them a call, 419-332-0532. And Chris, we always appreciate your time and your perspective. Thank you for asking some of the hard questions that we need to examine in order to have realistic expectations.
And my pleasure. Good to be with everybody today. Be safe out there and may God bless America.
Tune into Chris McIntire's full radio program and visit McIntyreRetirementServices.com for many additional valuable resources, including other great episodes of Game Plan for Retirement with Chris McIntire. Be sure to subscribe.
The content of this radio show is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. You are encouraged to seek investment, tax, or legal advice from an independent professional advisor. Any investments and/or investment strategies mentioned involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. Advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, a registered investment advisor.
Fiduciary duty extends solely to investment advisory advice and does not extend to other activities such as insurance or broker-dealer services. Advisory clients are charged a quarterly fee for assets under management, while insurance products pay a commission, which may result in a conflict of interest regarding compensation.